Do you like magic? Do you like to explore expansive open worlds? What about pronouns and top surgery scars for gender transitioning? Well, not that last part, but that's exactly what you would get if you picked up a copy of the new Dragon Age Veilguard game that just launched. A woke slopfest of a game that received a 9 out of 10 from IGN. A dog turd that has had a lukewarm launch at best and has been getting completely destroyed on the Steam charts by a beta of the new Monster Hunter Wilds game. If this isn't evidence that most mainstream gaming news is bought and sold, then I don't know what is. It must have just cashed in that check from BioWare and EA. A groundbreaking franchise that's been revived from the dead, similar to Frankenstein, is losing to a beta version of the new Monster Hunter Wilds while IGN praises it. Veilguard, a game that's been touted as having breakout potential by EA's CEO Andrew Wilson, isn't doing so great, and that's because of the obvious agenda being pushed in the game. Turns out Gender Bender Simulator wasn't the genre gamers were asking for, and this point is just further proven by the fact that a beta version of a game that is set to release later this year is outperforming Veilguard. Since its initial trailers and now horrendous launch, time and time again, more evidence is coming out that this game is yet another product of the failed DEI agenda, and most gamers must have caught on to this now that the game is out because the Steam numbers for Veilguard are nowhere near what EA and BioWare were imagining. But I also can't forget to mention the controversies around this game, from the stick figure character creator to the game-altering gendered gameplay. I think Dragon Age Veilguard is doomed to fail and fall off hard. Now, I've been tracking this game for the last couple weeks, and I think I built up a pretty comprehensive overview of why this game is failing with gamers. First and foremost, the obvious woke agenda being pushed. But don't take my word for it. According to one of the previous writers for Dragon Age, the franchise has always had a history of being woke. David Geider, who was a former writer for Dragon Age, posted this to Twitter in response to fans and criticisms of the new game. Apparently, the usual suspects are upset at how woke the new Dragon Age is, an apparently sudden and unexpected development in the series. Effing tourists. Now, that's obviously satire in a really bad way as a game writer to brand your games as woke, especially in 2024, where anything remotely close to woke will be tossed into a blender by players and critics. Now, Geider's comments are coming in response to the fans' reactions of the new stick figure character creator in Veilguard. Lots of people on Twitter were obviously upset by the lack of inclusive body types, mainly over the fact that your character could have a penis the size of a continent while only having an ass comparable to a 100-pound woman. Now, I don't understand why having a bump on the back of a 3D model could be so controversial, but apparently it is. And Geider would continue to get angry at these kind of comments with further replies, saying, the females aren't hot enough. Yet, because they've clued into this notion that this is obviously incel behavior, they've swapped out unattractive for masculine, and thus transgender, because this is a framing that makes them seem political instead of porn-brained. Yet, we all know what they mean. No, we don't know what you mean, David. In fact, I think it's insane to suggest that people are porn addicted because they want different body types that are more attractive. Not every person with a curve is a porn star. Like, holy hell, I can open Instagram and a curvy woman will jump scare my real feed faster than I can think. It's just crazy to me that you can include gender transitioning scars, but a little bump on a 3D model is just too egregious. So the big fuss Geider and most folks are making is over this new character creator that includes having various kinds of scars and body types. Cuts, bruises, scrapes, but the most controversial of all, surgery scars. One of those surgery scars was the top surgery scars for gender transitioning. I understand that fantasy stories are meant to have all kinds of characters, but gender isn't really supposed to play a major role in your character's overarching story. You don't cheer for your gender in battle, you cheer for victory and resilience. Emotional situations and difficult decisions should be the main focus for your story, not pronouns and gender ideology. But the game pushes this in your face at every turn. One user on Twitter would criticize the game by saying, because top surgery scars would exist in a medieval fantasy world with magic. Another example where they are pushing their morals into the world. And I think this rings true because it doesn't make sense to perform surgery in a world full of magic. It just feels like another DEI feature. Another user on Twitter would also add to this comment saying, with all the magic in Dragon Age universe, they conveniently have to do it the same way as real life. Now, it might not be a big deal because this is just a cosmetic, but there's also another big feature apart from this, which is a choice to select your character's gender and pronouns. This feature actually affects your gameplay, and the storyline talks about it nonstop. There was even a pre-launch game tester who broke their NDA with screenshots to expose just how important Veilguard is making pronouns. Alongside this screenshot, they would add a comment saying, for anyone still on the fence about what I mean when I say the game is woke, it'll tell you at every single turn. Having diverse characters is not being woke. Having fantasy characters using modern day language is being woke. And I couldn't agree further with this statement because it outlines just how out of touch BioWare has become with the fantasy world they've created. The game tester would also go on to share more screenshots which detailed how important gender is because your gender allowed you to unlock different and new quest lines. So you're basically locked out from exploring the entire game unless you chose to switch your character's gender. Now that's something that is absolutely insane to me. I have to identify as a non-binary person if I want to get my full money's worth out of the game, and I think it's really stupid to include this as a mechanic in a game about magic and fantasy. Now you remember how I mentioned earlier that EA CEO Andrew Wilson claimed the game had breakout potential? Well, that potential must have faded out quickly because the game only managed to peak at over 110,000 concurrent players in its launch weekend. For reference, the Monster Hunter Wilds beta managed to peak at over 463,000 concurrent players. That's well over a 400% difference in the player count. Now let's compare that launch to other actual breakout hits this year, starting with Warhammer 40k. On launch, Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2 had a peak of over 225,000 concurrent players. That's about double what Veilguard got. Now let's take another game like Black Myth Wukong, which came from a relatively unknown studio. That game had a peak concurrent player count of over 2.4 million. That's a real breakout hit. Both of these games are clear examples of what a massive successful game looks like. Veilguard, on the other hand, has struggled to attract and retain players. And I think this is a result of what happens when you make gender a central focus of your game. You lose touch with what makes it so great in the first place, and players end up frustrated at the resulting product. So yeah, that's my analysis of Veilguard in a nutshell. A game that tried to bring inclusivity to medieval fantasy but ended up alienating the fanbase that made the franchise what it is. Instead of focusing on magic, dragons, and epic storytelling, BioWare and EA decided to cram in modern social agendas that just don't fit. At the end of the day, maybe it's time for developers to remember that gamers just want a good game, not a lecture. Veilguard could have been a major comeback, but with numbers this bad, it's looking more like another nail in the coffin for BioWare and EA. Well, that's it for today's video. If you guys have any opinions on the topics discussed, leave them in the comments below. I really appreciate you guys for making it to the end of the video, and as always, have a good one.